But even as a child, I was an overachiever, and that kind of started backfiring as I got older because my memory became shorter, things required more work. I suppose now, knowing as an adult, I also have PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance. Processes are a little bit different. So very lonely as a child and battled to integrate or even be on the same level as people sometimes. Not to say that they were anything less, but not something I could relate to freely.
Not a disability, but a ability.
Hi, mamas and daddies. Welcome to Not a Disability But Ability podcast. I'm your host, Obonyewe Liepile, mother to an awesome neurodivergent child. Today, I'm joined by Kelly Eyre, a nice, phenomenal woman, which I met actually on social media. So I'm going to give her an opportunity to introduce herself. And yeah, let's take it over to Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me. It's much, much appreciated. So my name is Kelly Eyre. I'm the mom to a neurodivergent child and a neurotypical child as well. So very different way of upbringing for both of them. But at the core of it, I'm also autistic. I was diagnosed at 33, sort of following the lead of my son in certain questions that were left unanswered. Career-wise, I work with children, which I'm very, very proud and passionate about. I'm what you call a quality and pedagogy lead for a company called Dibber International South Africa. And they look at the whole child, which I find very aligning with the way that I view children and raising my own. I'm married into a massive family, which has been the greatest support system for raising a child, on the spectrum, as well as my own, to sort of having that understanding. So that's a part of me in a nutshell. But yeah, just exploring and understanding children and in the context that they work in and how they are. So my passion feeds into my everyday life of who I actually am as an individual as well.
Okay. So let's take it back in the beginning. You said you were diagnosed at age 33.
Yes.
So now we're going to take it back. Tell us, how was your childhood?
Oh, so I grew up in the 90s. I suppose it was sort of the generation that was seen and not heard, which I think made it a little bit more difficult. I think in those days to understand the concept of neurodivergency, I was what we call a laat lammetjie, meaning very, very late born. I have a sister who's 10 years older than me and a brother that's 13 years older than me. So I grew up half as an only child, but half as a child with siblings. I suppose growing up in the 90s was obviously very difficult because I think I got glasses at a very young age. I was very bullied from primary school into high school. I think I only really started understanding myself in relation to others probably in first year varsity. Changed degrees, which was fun in that. And I think I always as a child struggled to fit in.
Okay.
And now I think as an adult, understanding who I could have been or who was at that stage, it's led to a lot of more clarification on why I felt so different in that regard as well.
Okay, talking about feeling different. So would you say that in your terms, when you're busy growing up, you see other kids, you socialize with other kids, but you could tell that I actually don't fit in with this type of people or in this type of setting. So how would that actually make you feel in that time?
I think I was lost. I think there was always this understanding of my mom always used to ask me, like, why don't you have that friend or somebody that was over all the time? And I think for my understanding in the beginning of my childhood was because my siblings were so much more older than me. I was expected to grow up faster. So it made the relatability a little bit harder. But now looking back, it was kind of that it didn't fit into that understanding of the world. I sort of wanted more from it because it was always that thing of mine of why? Why does it have to be like that? And I suppose when you're a kid, you don't want that constant questioning from other kids of why is it that way? I was also, what I thought at that time, severely sensitive to anything. It wasn't. It was the autistic within myself. We are prone to be sensitive. So instead of outcasting it as, oh, you're just sensitive, it was my feelers and the way that I was in the world. And that becomes very isolating. And I suppose more of a target for that. I also still am a people pleaser, which is something I've had to learn over the years. But even as a child, I was an overachiever, and that kind of started backfiring as I got older because my memory became shorter, things required more work. I suppose now, knowing as an adult, I also have PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance. Processes are a little bit different. So very lonely as a child and battled to integrate or even be on the same level as people sometimes. Not to say that they were anything less, but not something I could relate to freely in that regard.
Okay. And then in terms of schooling, did you go to like a mainstream school, and was it difficult for you to also fit in with the curriculum and everything in terms of school? And the teachers, how were the teachers? How were you treated?
Primary school for me was probably the easiest out of everything because I think they enjoyed the glory hanging or the glory wanting to be part of that. I mean, I still see my grade 1 teacher quite frequently. So that was easy. Mainstream, I went to a very well-renowned boarding school, which obviously didn't work out for my personality, not knowing then why. And then going into a very small, not known high school, should I say. It was difficult. I was once told by a teacher that I'd never amount to anything because I couldn't do her particular subject. And that for me was very saddening because being an overachiever, well, before it became stubbornness and difficulty, that was hard to hear. And then sort of being taken aside by a very brilliant biology teacher and a brilliant English lecturer, well, teacher in that regard, I learned the love of language and the love of biology and how systems worked. But when it came to math and physics, that wasn't my strong point. And I kind of wished, knowing then, if I hadn't been pushed into certain classrooms or certain atmospheres, maybe that would look different for me. But you build up that resiliency.
Yeah.
So I'm brilliant with facts. Now I know why, because of the autism. And I love language because language gives us the why, the very great why. So schooling was hard for me. Varsity was an exploration time. Unfortunately, my second year of varsity, my mom died of cancer. So that was very difficult to navigate, and sort of you've had that, core binding person for your life, and then you hit 19 and you sort of spiral almost. And although I didn't go the drug or the alcoholic route, I did get lost in that, having to change degrees as well. But I think every path has a meaning.
Yeah.
And we're meant to be rediverged. But I think school for me, I wish had been a better experience. And I wish the bullying had been removed from it and that there was a better understanding of neurodiversity in the 90s. Because I think neurodiversity was very a boy thing, where I was sort of categorized as gifted. But then the giftedness started running out as soon as I got into the older age groups of high school in that regard.
Okay, so now let's go to the process of varsity. Now you're in varsity. You said you've lost your mom, but you still have your older siblings.
And my dad.
And your dad. So how is the support that they're giving you at that time helping you in terms of now changing? Because you said you've changed even course.
Yes.
Yeah, so now changing and rerouting now your life. How was the support?
I think the support was always there. I just think it was my stubbornness of not asking for it. And I think you kind of, as much as I was grieving, they were grieving as well. And I think as a 19-year-old, you don't have that footing yet. You don't have that understanding. But they were always there, and they always have been there in their own way. But I think it's taking time. I was very much self-sufficient at that point. And I think sometimes when what I call the crash and burn, maybe if I'd been slightly more open or receiving of it, it might have been received in a different way, because you become very defensive in your reliability of yourself, where you don't need others. So for part of me wishes I had been a bit more open to say, hey, I'm drowning or I'm battling with this XYZ. But a large majority of the time when I was struggling, my sister was a big catalyst in, sort of me getting support because they thought I was depressed. They thought I was, which is rightfully so. I think losing any parent at any age will make that change.
Yes.
So my sister was very much the catalyst in terms of getting support. But at that time, you don't go autism, you don't go neurodiverse, you go depression, battling, which is that's what GPs kept telling me. It was a string of you're bipolar, you're manic depressive, you're just depressive, or you have an anxiety problem. So when it looked like I was having anxiety attacks, I wasn't. I was having meltdowns.
Oh. Okay.
But having known that, and even now they are more receiving of the information as well. I remember when I told my brother that I was autistic, he was like, yes, that fits. That makes more sense. And I was like, thanks for telling me that 3 years ago. But they have, and it's their own way of understanding. And I think it's finding my own feet through these conversations where I think they've allowed me the space to explore it and admit it. And I still, anything that's written about me or anything that advocates, they're the first people to read it.
Yeah.
So that's important. So I think the support has always been there. I think me receiving the support has been a different conversation.
Yeah.
But I think it's about opening the doors to receive more support. And I kind of looking back, I wish I'd done that a little bit more.
Okay. So were you aware of neurodivergency? Now we are still at your tertiary level. Were you aware that there's something called autism, there's neurodivergency? Were you aware of it?
I think probably at fourth year varsity, I was probably more aware because I have a psych background. I specialized in early childhood development, and it's sort of a buzzword. It's something you go through in your studying, but not really living it or understanding it until I got to my honors year where we had to do hours for our degree. And I ended up working in Westkoppies in Pretoria. And for me, that was a wide awakening to what could be there in terms of the neurodiverse spaces where it's not just autism. And I think many people get stuck in that. We don't understand that neurodiversity is a bigger picture than just autism. And I think for me, only coming into more senior adulthood or of my degree, did it become a more realer concept in what the understanding is, because you hear children are autistic or you hear that they have ADHD, but I think there's a very big difference in learning about it, working with it, and then living with it.
True.
So I was aware, but not to the extent that I am now at all.
So in terms of what you just mentioned now, that it's actually 3 different experiences, can you define or go more deep into those 3 different stages?
I think learning about it is the context of the theory in what people assume that it looks like, not necessary assumption. And I say that from the point of view of, if you have met one autistic individual, it means just that you have only met one, because they present so differently in their own way. Some mask higher than much others do. And I think that's why women are often missed, because it's covered, it's masked, where we don't understand the full extent. So that's more the theory of what you assume you're looking at. Working with it is that attachment. It's about being in the moment with those individuals, whether it be ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, apraxia. It's about that touching. It's about that integration that is with it. And I think living with it is more real to the individual, and it's an own personal experience. My personal experience of autism is not my son's. It's completely different. And understanding that each of us have different support needs in different capacities, and what he may struggle with, I may struggle differently with or more. Where I think in different phases of our lives, it changes and it's different. So I think it's that involved notion, the external, and then just the acknowledgement. And it's 3 different levels of understanding. And I think I can advocate and I can say that I'm autistic, but that might not be the same lived experience as somebody else.
Yeah.
And that takes acknowledgement of the difference between, it's more insightful in what it is.
So now you have been going through your therapy. You know, your sister is thinking maybe you're depressed and all those things. You've been diagnosed with whatever that you're diagnosed with, your bipolar and stuff. when do you realize also that, okay, maybe, or was it through your studies or your experiences when you need to go do your practicals that, no man, I think I may be neurodivergent? Like, when does that light come in?
So for me, it was a lot later, and I think it was only after my son was diagnosed. Like, you sort of relate to the experiences in such a way, especially the hyperfixations. That was the first major telltale sign for me, was I have severe hyperfixations. So something becomes, I want it done and I want it done now. So that was a big awakening for me. The next, I suppose, was the sensory. So I'm a very sound orientated stimmer. So I can have music blasting in my ears, in my headphones, with the same song repeatedly for months and not notice it, where my husband will play music at home and I'm overwhelmed automatically. So definitely from a seeking space. Another aspect was people. Certain spaces I'm energized, certain spaces are a no-go. I become very overwhelmed in supermarkets sometimes, or people standing on top of me. So it's very codependent triggered. But the more I started having conversations with parents of autistic children, the relatability of my childhood came in, where parents were like, I was like this, and I was like, no, but so was I. But actually understanding my diagnosis came from moving to a new GP, and the GP we were sort of discussing Aaron, my son, and she sort of said, do you not think you have similar traits? Do you not think this is resonating? And I was like, I don't know. Ended up speaking to my son's pediatrician, and I asked him a simple question. I said to him, do you think I'm on the spectrum? And his response was easy. I wish you had come to me 2 years ago, because I knew already. So already knowing that somebody had externally seen those behaviors, and then to have it later confirmed by a GP to sort of say, yes, those are definite outlining triggers of what you are experiencing. So I'm what you call a low support spectrum, because we don't use the term high and low functioning anymore. So I'm a low support, but there are things I really battle with. And I think that realization of knowing that I wasn't not enough, but it's rather just, not just autism, but it gave way to answers that I wasn't too sensitive, or I wasn't too much, or the obsessions were abnormal. They're just part of a processing system that I have to learn to understand.
So getting that confirmation from the pediatrician, I understand from your words, you saying that it actually gave you a sense of relief that, oh, now it makes sense. Like, throughout, I've been struggling to find out, why am I like this? So why am I like that? And I can imagine you having an internal battle with yourself, as much as there's battles with sensitivity, battles with a crowd dealing. You also have your own internal battle, because you don't know what's happening. And I'm sure you're asking yourself, why can't I? Why can't I just be like that kid who can make a friend easy? Why can't I just listen to that music? Or why can't I just wear this type of clothing? So how was your internal frustration at that time?
I think heavy. I think to know that there was an answer of that it's not just sensitivity, and it's not to give it an excuse. And I think there's a fine boundary between the two of, my autism is not an excuse, it's an explanation, but it's also for me a relief to know there were certain things, like other elements, I would battle with something that somebody else would do so easily. And I would sort of go, but why is that not the case? Or I think for me, knowing that I'm not too much, and I think surrounding myself, especially the work environment that I'm in now currently, they support that. So they know where those triggers are and they understand, but it is an internal frustration. And it's not to say it's ever gone away, because the answer is there. But I suppose it's given me a space where I can be more gentle on myself, and I can be more receiving of the way of who I am, because at the end of the day, we're all constantly fighting that battle of the confidence level within ourselves. But I think it's just taught me maybe to be more accepting of others as well, where maybe they're battling with something that maybe they're not aware of, or they're not conscious of in their own regard. And I make many mistakes, even with my autism. I do have a very sharp edge, so I do not tend to overreact, but I get very passionate about something, and sometimes that's not received as passion.
Yeah.
So I've got to be mindful in it, but that doesn't mean I have to hide myself. I mean, I was once told, being in the professional capacity that I am now, I network a lot for advocacy as well. And I had somebody once say to me, like, I don't think you should tell people that you're autistic because it makes you unrelatable and it actually shows what you're not strong at. And I took that up as a challenge to say, I've hid it for so long in my own understanding. I am not going to downsize myself because you don't have a better understanding of autism. And for me, that's what I fear autism is I don't fear autism. I don't fear what that is. I fear people who don't understand it. And now as an adult, I do have a small group of friends, a small group of ladies, but they're also neurodivergent. So I think for me, it's about standard and quality and those that understand me for who I am. And that's okay. I don't need anything more. Yeah. And I'd rather have 3 people stand up for me than a crowd that won't even care to.
True.
But it is hard and it is an internal struggle that I think I face daily. It never goes away, but the frustration management has become a little bit easier to see through the blinders or what might be more difficult or a challenge that I can take up differently.
So in terms of your son, tell us, take us through the journey. What you saw, what were you suspecting with your child and the symptoms that you've seen that made you want to actually investigate?
So I think his was very difficult. And I think a lot of people sort of subjectively had hoped that I had picked it up quicker with my background. But I suppose when you have your own child, you have blinders on each side. I ignored Aaron's signs for about a year because there was no way. In my head, it was nothing against autism. It was not my child.
Yeah.
We had also gone through COVID. He was only 2 and a bit when COVID hit properly, and he was doing well at school. Initially, he was saying words, and then going through COVID and then going back into what we deemed normal, the speech became less and less, and he didn't present typically. And I don't mean that in a generalization. He wasn't. And I think that's where I struggled, where you asked about how did you know more?
Yeah.
And I think for me, it was the lack of speech, but he never lined things up in a row. He never ground his teeth. He never showed the atypical assumption of what I knew was autism. And I think that's where the broad understanding comes in. And, you know, we sort of noticed, and family members had sort of said, you know, maybe you should do something. And it was just like, no, it was COVID. He wasn't integrated because of the time, you know, schools had opened in the July. We only went back in the September. So I thought it was the gap, but that gap kept getting bigger and bigger. And then when he ended up in a different school, he started lashing out very badly. He was biting teachers. He was biting children. He was scratching their faces. The one day he tried to scale a 2-meter wall to get out. And these sort of led to the idea of, okay, now we need a speech assessment. So he started off there, and originally he was diagnosed with an 18-month speech delay, which was quite common, I think, during COVID and those times. The behavior got worse and worse and worse, and it ended up that the school that he was at that time had asked me to remove him. And that's hard because when you're a parent in this economy, it is very difficult. My husband and I were both working, and to find another school and rush it in, it was very, very hard. And my son ended up having to stay with his grandmother for 8 weeks so we could mitigate what that school life looked like. And during that time, my mom-in-law found the most phenomenal pediatrician in Ladysmith, and he eventually diagnosed him. And I think it was hard to swallow. It was an acceptance that it took me a year to come around to actually even verbalize that he was autistic. And I think I had to remove my ego, where I had to understand this is not my journey, it's his. And you're my tour guide, and you're going to show me how the ropes go. So it was a hard pill to swallow in terms of the progression. He's been asked to move multiple schools, and that I think has been a challenge for him to fit in and to find. So for me, it was a little bit of ignorance, I think, to give him the space. And I think we waited a little bit too long. But the leaps and bounds he's made today through the proper engagement and the proper speech therapist, it's actually not as bad as what my brain, I think, at the time was processing it. Although it was rough, I think it makes me more grateful for where we are now. And I'm glad we took it up to get the help, and that's what led me to get my help. So he's sort of a catalyst in the understanding of myself as well.
Yeah.
But it was difficult. It was very a difficult pill to swallow. And, you know, when you come from such a big family, I mean, he's got 7 cousins that are very close in age to him as well. One does not compare,
Yeah.
which is very, very difficult as well. But I've sort of have to overcome that and go, he has his strengths in his own way. And it might not be today. It might be in the future. We don't know who he'll be big cousin to. And I think that's the part of letting go of that worry, is that he has done so much that I think a lot of other parents might take for granted. We celebrate the smallest wins. And I think I'm grateful for that, because I have a neurotypical son as well. And I think we don't often celebrate it as much as when a child makes a milestone we were told once they would never. That also creates a large bit of gratitude in the beauty of these children and in the beauty of me. And I feel more accepted with him. And
Yeah.
that's important as well.
No, I totally understand. And I think I can relate to when you're saying that after getting the diagnosis, it was even harder for you to actually even say the words. I think that was the grieving process that we need to go through, because also my son experienced a regress. So you can imagine your child is talking, is singing, is doing everything, and then boom, one day there's
It
no
just
words.
stops.
It just stops. So I totally understand where you're coming from in that regard. And now, who is more older between your son and your other neurotypical son?
So there's a 19-month age gap. And Aaron, who's my neurodivergent child, is older. And that has also created a struggle because he wasn't speaking at the age that he should have been. His younger brother has taken a little bit more time to also grow into that as well. So he doesn't have the role model of the language from his brother, which is different and difficult. But a lot of people have had controversy over what I'm about to say now is we haven't given Aaron's label to his brother. We have mentioned it, but we haven't said your brother's just autistic. We've sort of tried to make him understand that his brother's different and that different is okay.
Yeah.
When he gets to the age where he can understand the word autism and what that means, I don't want him to have one single definition.
Yeah.
I don't want him to be outcasted in the sense of your brother's autistic, therefore he can't. Where we just say to him, your brother's brain works a little bit differently. He views the world like you a little bit differently. And I don't want him to see his brother as anything less or anything more. So we do say autistic, but we haven't given him the diagnostic label. It's more we accept your brother for who he is. But we also have tried to teach Aaron and Sebastian that there is a child before the diagnosis. And yes, my son is neurotypical in those ways. He pushes boundaries as a 7 turning 8-year-old. The stubbornness is there. So I've had to, as a parent, step back and go, is it the autism or is it the typical 7-year-old and 8-year-old?
Yeah.
And that's taken a while to understand. But then again, you go back to living with it and studying it. As somebody in the psychology, you kind of automatically know, but when it's your own flesh and blood, you have to kind of read between the lines with it as well. And I just feel like they are both unique in their own ways and they both need to be celebrated differently as well. But always acknowledging that Sebastian is still there. And I think when Aaron went to his grand for 8 weeks, we actually saw Sebastian a little bit more. You know, we sort of used to pander to Aaron's needs, not to have a meltdown. That was the ignorance of a very young couple trying to interpret autism. And when Aaron went away for those 8 weeks, I mean, this child had a ball. Don't get me wrong. He got to go to Tanzania for 3 weeks. He got to go to Zanzibar like this. My sister and brother-in-law are amazing in that regard. And we just got to see Sebastian for what he liked and what he enjoyed. So I think that's also with parents of siblings, with one being on the spectrum, we always have to find that balance. And that's very difficult sometimes as well.
And then in terms of your marriage, did it take a toll between you and your husband? Because you can imagine it's not easy. It's very difficult raising a child who's on a spectrum. And now you're on the spectrum yourself also. So he needs to come and understand, you know, it's not like, for a lack of better word, a physical disability where you just know that it's limited to this.
Yes.
But when it's a neurodivergency, it has its own ups and downs. Today it's like this, tomorrow things have changed. So how has your relationship been with your husband?
I think it's going to be a challenge. I think any special needs couple who is dealing with that. And I think being female and male, we both take it from different standpoints. And I think his internalization is very different to mine. And I think as women, not that it's any less or any more, but you carried this child, you birthed this child. I put a lot of the blame on myself, which I think he struggled with as well. And I think we've just had to have conversations where I think you have to have a united standpoint to say, this is our child and we will do. And often he's been the one that's more trying to comfort me in the terms like when in the beginning, when we got really bad results in terms of the school or the schools couldn't provide for him, I would almost defend it where he would kind of hear them and I wouldn't hear them because that defensiveness comes out. But I think it does take a lot, but I think once we'd both found a space where we accept Aaron for who he is and this is what it is, it becomes an easier conversation. But yes, it does take a toll. And I think that's on anything, whether it's physical or mental or both. We just know that we are both there for him in the way that we can be. And we do parent a little bit differently, and that's okay. I will often turn to him when Aaron gets into his stubborn moments because sometimes he needs more of that authoritative space and being, because discipline is also very important. It's the boundaries that we create as well. But I think him and his family have been the biggest catalyst in supporting and helping Aaron, and I'm extremely grateful for them as well. But it doesn't come with ease.
Yeah.
It is difficult, but I think if the open conversation is always there between the two of us where we know we are making decisions together, it's not a separate, othered, relationship. So Aaron does have bad days, even mainstreaming at the moment. And what would normally happen is I would get the phone call and on the way there, I'm phoning my husband to say, this is what's happened with Aaron. So keeping each other constantly in the loop about that, because he's in construction, he works very long days and very long hours, but just keeping that notification of communication is always important. So when he drops Aaron off in the morning, I get a phone call. I can literally time it to the minute. Aaron's drop-off was good. He went in okay. So I think it's that constant feedback. And then when Aaron's had a bad day, whether that be behavioral or the spectrum needs, whatever it is, he's the reinforcer. And I think it's allowing myself to take a step back and step forward when that's needed from the both of us. And I think that's about communication. So as much as it is hard, communication is always key as well, and knowing that you're on the same team. You're not rooting for two different things as well. He's very good. My husband's very good in terms of like the medical stuff. Sometimes he will take a step back and say to me, it's what you are comfortable with. And sometimes I will have to do that as well. But it's not easy on any front of it as well. But at the end of the day, we were the two of us before him. Yeah. And that's also strength and power in it as well.
That is so true. And then now, would you say that you being autistic, raising an autistic child as a mother and as an autistic individual, because you were an individual before you became a mother also. Yeah. How would you say your relationship is?
With myself?
With yourself and your autistic child.
I think the relationship with myself has become a little bit stronger since the diagnosis. And I think the biggest misconception is that I always get Aaron. I don't sometimes because our autism is completely different, and there are days where I can be stimming and, that frustration that you were talking about, and he could be mid-meltdown, and then it's that knocking heads that we've got to come together to sort of figure out the situation. So it is very difficult sometimes, especially with our jobs, with our life, with our everything. I've got to make sure that balance is always there, I'm still a mom and a mom first, but like you said, I was a person before I became a mother. And I think that's just about making sure I have check-ins, making sure that if I need to take a walk, I'd rather take a walk away than interfere with it. And I've told parents this when I've done parent talks, is that often when I am stimming, and the stim is not a positive stim, it's often sometimes a negative stim, and Aaron is doing something, I will often say to him, my boy, you're irritating me. And a lot of parents have gone, how can you say that? But at the same time, I'm modeling how the behavior should be. So by me saying to him, Aaron, you're irritating me, I'm giving him a boundary. And I expect him to return that boundary when he's older. If I'm bothering him, for him to respectfully say to me, Mom, not now. And I'd rather model that than ignore it, because I want him to understand that even if he has autism, we are different people walking around the world.
True.
So our relationship is really good. I love being called mom. Mom is probably my favorite name, except when it's being whined all the time. But we learn, and it's a privilege. But we do have a very strong relationship, and I encourage strong relationships throughout the family. He's very close to his grandmother as well. I was very close to mine. So it's something that I deeply have a deep respect for as well. And I want him to have more than one person to go to.
Yeah.
I've struggled with that as a kid. It was either my mom or my sister. And sometimes if you don't have the same personality, you need an out. You need that for me, it was my godmother. That was my big thing. So I always want him to have that space. But in terms of a relationship, he knows I'm always there. I don't ever want him to be scared of me. I don't ever want an authoritative relationship, but I do want a respectful one as well, because that's how I want him to feed into the world of those that he interacts with as well. So sometimes it is hard, especially when his meltdowns have been physical in the past as well. He's also hurt me quite a few times, not intentionally, but it's the bite or the kick or that hold during a meltdown as well. But I never hold it against him. And it was something that was actually taught to me by his manager of his school, because her son is also on the spectrum as well. And her biggest advice to me was, when something happens, we acknowledge it and we move on. Tomorrow is a new day. So for me, that's been a big lesson, not to begrudge, because as an autistic adult, grudgement is a big thing with me. It's that justice and fairness that I battle with sometimes. But it's the acknowledgement of it's done. We try again tomorrow. That didn't work. We keep going. We cannot lay it on or hold the begrudgement. And I think that's important as a teacher as well. We have to keep moving forward. Failing forward is my favorite thing to think about. But it becomes difficult. But I always want him to know there's a space with me, and I'm going to role model it, even though it's not the same, and that we're going to be okay through the whole experience as well.
So through your profession as a teacher, are you teaching neurotypical kids or neurodivergent kids?
So when I was a teacher, because I now am more on the curriculum development side of it, but when I was a teacher, we had a plethora of everything. I've taught CP kids in the past. I have taught Down syndrome children in the past. For me, a child is valuable. It doesn't matter whether you're neurotypical or not. I see children holistically. Like I said earlier, it's that holistic guidance, and it shouldn't matter what the label is. So we are seeing an uprising of numbers in education. It's becoming, a lot of people argue that there's an increase. I don't think there's an increase. I think we are just more aware of what we are looking at. I think it's always been there. I mean, the joke is your grandmother with the 550 spoons, or the plates that don't get touched, or the ornaments. There's a little bit of that, like I like to call the tism in it as well. So I've had the opportunity to work with a multiple array of different children, and different doesn't necessarily have to carry a label, but we are going to experience it, and it's going to become more prevalent, whether that is ADHD, your dyslexia, your apraxia, your CP even, it's going to become more of a realistic. And my hope for education is that it doesn't just get called mainstream.
Yeah.
The UK has a beautiful way of integrating within their nursery system where everyone is welcome, whether that is in a nursery school, whether that is in a wheelchair, whether that is everything. We are seen as on the same playing field as well. So it's sad now that it's either mainstream or remedial, where it should just be a collective of both as well. But yeah, I've had quite a bit of experience with it, and I think each child has taught me something new. It's not a subject standard. Each child presents differently, but they also present with uniqueness. And that's the important part to hold on to. Even your neurotypical children have taught me so much in the way they view the world that it shouldn't be as far. I think we all see our world differently. Doesn't have to necessarily have a label in it either.
No, I understand it 100%, and I agree with you. So in terms of now your professional experience, discipline, what is your take on discipline, more especially neurodivergent kids? Because, sometimes you find parents saying that I cannot reprimand my child because of he or she has autism. So what is your stand on it?
I think the most important thing is to always remember, like I've said before, there is a child before the diagnosis. there are certain elements that are exasperated because of what they might be battling with or what they find difficulty in. But I think it's very important to always have a boundary because you want to teach your child and model your child the boundary. There are still consequences to reactions. And I think we're putting children at a massive disadvantage if we're allowing space for bad behavior. Aaron can't break something and, it's because he's autistic. We have to separate the two. Remember, discipline is not just about discipline in the moment. It's about safety. It's about understanding that certain things cannot happen. You will get hurt. And I think by not disciplining a neurodivergent child, we might be setting them up for further harm or further failure. We've seen the high percentage drown rates in autistic individuals because they're so drawn to water. But if we create the proper understanding of consequence, if the child is at the functional level to understand it, I don't think they should be stopped from discipline. Obviously, we're not trying to abuse the child. And I think there's a line that is drawn between the older generation and the new generation, especially the generation I grew up in. Heaven forbid my mom got to 3. But I think it's not about that smack or the abuse. It's about how it is done and how the consequence is. Vescorpies has an amazing, when we were there, they had an amazing idea of choice, which I think is very important. You can choose to do X, Y, and Z, but you're going to get an A, B, and C answer in terms of what that, that consequence is, and whether or not that's having privileges taken away, whether that's having certain elements of the day disregarded. So my mother-in-law lives with us currently, and on a Friday afternoon, both the boys get taken out for a McDonald's ice cream. That's their treat from her. But they know, neurodivergent or not, if they don't participate in class, if they don't follow instructions at home, that falls away. And it's happened quite a few Fridays where either of them have misbehaved. So I think discipline is important, but discipline has to be comfortable to the parent, but not that it's affecting others negatively. How you discipline and how I discipline might be completely different, but there have been times in Aaron's story that we've had to be very, very firm. I mean, he's scratched a teacher from the top of the face all the way down. That takes consequence because you can't get away with hurting somebody who was helping you. Whatever that discipline method is, my personal method into it, but he's never done it again. Doesn't mean I've abused him to do that. He just knows that there is a consequence for that action. And with neurotypical children, they are extremely intelligent. And I hate using the word, they're manipulative. They see things faster than your average person does, and they manipulate the system, not maliciously, but to the point that it advances them. I mean, a lot of adults that I've spoken to, when they used to write exams, they used to get so frustrated because they were like, why do I have to write an exam on something you already know that I know?
No,
And I'm kind of like, I like that way of thinking because why are we repetitively doing something if it's just for a mark? I often question that as well. So I think there's a balance, and I just feel that even if you have a difficulty, like even if you are diabetic, that doesn't mean you can't be disciplined. I think you can be gentle in your nature, but you can still be firm because at the end of the day, you need to put your child into this world that unfortunately is not built for them. We try advocate to make that world a little bit more so that they step into it with confidence. But if you are stepping into a situation undisciplined, what is that going to help you in the long term? It's the same as me admitting I'm autistic. I'm never going to use it as an excuse. I'm going to show you that in despite of everything, I can. But I would rather say I'm autistic for that little girl who might not fit in, who might not know. But then to know I have 3 qualifications behind me. I'm also writing, I've written a book. I've been able to go on multiple platforms. I want that to be sought out, that I can, whatever my I can is. But I was heavily disciplined as a child. I mean, I was raised by an ICU nurse. And if you've been raised by a nurse, you will understand there's no such thing as a sick day. There isn't. And I was raised by a very highly intelligent electrical engineer. There was firm discipline and boundary. And also my mom worked in ICU, which was a lot of your accident victims and that. And she saw death on a daily basis. She was fearful of that with us. So as much as the time she could have disciplined me differently, as an adult, I kind of appreciate it because it's given me my firm boundary, how I respect people, how I speak to them. And you can never take that away from me in that.
So there's just saying that during our conversation, you mentioned that girls usually get diagnosed at a later stage than boys. Why do you think that that is?
I think it comes from a generational idea of ADHD in the 90s and the 80s, for that matter, was a boy thing. That it was boys who are loud. It is an assumption that boys who are loud and proud, oh, they're ADHD. They're all over the place. Where girls are sort of muffled into that quieter space. I mean, it's that whole boy code where you don't show emotion as a boy, but heaven forbid you don't show it as a female. And I think a lot of the behaviors are almost taken out of us to behave in a certain way that when we reach our teens, then everything falls apart. So I think it's the way that girls are, there's an expectation. For me, there was an expectation of, I literally started speaking at 9 months old. I was doing rhymes at 9 months old and speaking. And your first initial thought is, oh, she must be intelligent.
Yeah.
You don't look further past that, where my godbrother, who I grew up very close to, he was a very close friend. He was diagnosed very early with ADHD, and he's also done phenomenal things as an adult. And he often said it was a label for him. He often said it was easier for them to see the behavior, but not mine. And the moment I said to him, I phoned him the one day and I said, listen, I'm on the spectrum. And he's like, I knew. So I think it's very masked. It's very hidden. It's women, it's always you're being dramatic, or you're PMSing, or you're too sensitive. What if it's not that? What if we just look at autism as autism, or neurodivergency? Why does it have to attach a gender?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be attached? But I think girls mask. I think that's the number one thing, is we mask heavily to fit in. We do as females, because we've got to find out where that mold is as well. But I think for females, it's very, very difficult. And the more we advocate and the more we say things, and I think we're more shy to admit it as well. You don't want to be seen as anything less as well. Where men are like, ADHD, that's what they are.
Yeah.
I think it's the times that need to change. And I think the more women, and I've seen that movement on TikTok and a lot of like Instagram, there's so many more creators that are popping up that are female, that are actually like, I'm neurodivergent.
Yeah.
And then you listen to their stories about it and you resonate it. And I think as the generations come in, we're going to see more of females being acknowledged, but not disvalued, that it can't be that. I think often it's the hormones. We always blame the hormones on women because we don't understand how that brain works or how the female body works.
Yeah.
And I think it's more of a disadvantage of understanding than anything else as to why girls are much later fallen through the cracks. My cracks only started showing up in grade 9 in terms of the entirety, when my marks started failing, especially for maths and physics, like I said earlier as well. Then it was Kelly's lazy. But a lot of autistics procrastinate. But that conversation was never had in that regard as well.
So as a profession now, what advice would you give a parent who's having a daughter? Because as I said, that with boys, I think with boys is more easier to pick up than with girls. So now there's a parent who's raising a daughter. What signs would you say maybe they need to look for? Because with, as you're saying, that with usually the symptoms and everything that are there or spoken about usually relate to boys than they do to girls. So in your profession, what would you say, what are those signs?
I think it's looking at things that are above an explanation. I always say that for me. So for me, the hyperfixation was a big thing, being very worrisome and very, very sensitive to certain things, but also acknowledging when something is not functioning or happy within the system. So for me personally, in what I was experiencing, I nail pick a lot as well. There were those telltale signs that were there as well. I used to tap, I still do sometimes, the tapping of the feet. So any irregular behavior that is uncomfortable to the individual, to the girl, to the daughter, to the sister, it needs to be heard. I think if there's something, for me as well, it was also clothing. Clothing was a massive issue for me, especially tags. They used to scratch uncomfortably. So if something is becoming not alarming, but more notable and it's causing discomfort, I would definitely then say, this is a conversation that needs to go to a neurologist or a ped, because it's something that's affecting the functioning of their daily existence as well. I struggle with heat as well. There were certain things that I wish hadn't been pushed under the rug where more conversation were to have. So I think if any parent is experiencing something that's creating dysfunction in their daughter's life, definitely that would be your telltale, because we're all going to present differently. I can't give you a thorough checklist on what that's going to look like because mine didn't look like the next person. But I think the main focus is that if anything is causing massive irregulation or coping mechanism, or to not brush it off as, oh, you're just being sensitive, or you're being a picky eater. I'm a picky eater. And I wish that had been picked up sooner. I struggle with certain textures of food. I don't enjoy spicy food. I don't, because of the high stimulation. To rather acknowledge it not as a phase. I think that's also the thing that we tend to do is she's going through a phase. If it's starting to disrupt her daily functioning of life, hear it and say, maybe we should investigate. It might be just a sensory problem, but at least you're then giving that child the tools in order to mitigate it. Because remember, you can have a sensory processing disorder, not necessarily mean that you have autism. And I think that's where the boundary is. And I'd rather, like Aaron's journey was, he was originally diagnosed at obviously the delay. The autism became later because those behaviors led to something else. And the fear that I have for girls in the most part is that's why my arms are tattooed where they are, is I became a cutter because of the frustration. And for me, it wasn't about tension. It wasn't about suicide. It's the pain relief of that moment. The cut was more regulating than having a conversation, which is sad. And that's normally what happens with autistic teens, is because there's nowhere to turn to, and that feeling of being abnormal and being alone, which is not abnormal. But that's the fear I have for those, where those little things that we could have helped with are not brought to light. So I think again, to answer your question, anything that doesn't regulate and help them, it needs to be investigated and not to shun it.
Yeah. And then what advice would you give that parent? Let's say now I'm seeing those things, especially in my teens, because I think that is where, you have your hormones of being a grown up coming in. Now you have this neurodivergency also on the other side. So when it comes together, they just create something else in your emotions and in your system. So I'm seeing that, I can see that my child is actually maybe overstimulated. And where do I go for help? Where do I start?
I think the best advice is to find a GP that you trust. I think that was my point of call. And now being an adult, I have that GP. She sees both my sons as well, and we're able to be spoken to, not at. So I feel comfortable in that space. So definitely a starting point would be a GP, or if you are seeing a therapist, a lot of people do see counselors, especially during the teen years, and to have these open conversations and never be afraid to ask, would it be these? I am experiencing this. So that's your first point of call. To get an appropriate diagnostic, it would then be a neurologist, or depending on the age of the child, a neurodivergent ped, because remember, peds also go up until the age of 18. It's not necessarily just young children.
Yeah.
So that's those type of individuals that can diagnose and give an answer. But I think just getting the answer is not enough. I think we need to find a therapist that we can speak it through. I didn't have that. I had it as an older adult. I didn't have it as a young child. And I think that would have made I only started therapy at 20. And even at that stage, that therapist wasn't picking anything up. But again, we're looking at the symptoms. I just lost my mom. You're not going to contribute autism to that, but maybe in the functionality in later years as well. So I think it's not just about getting the diagnosis. I think it's about then making steps that then help you. So I carry fidgets around. I carry noise cancelling headphones around. I always create spaces where I can make myself comfortable, where I don't need not other support, but I have control mechanisms. We've been speaking a lot about the coping. So I think it's not just about getting the diagnosis, it's being held through the process. Even if you have a child that's being diagnosed and you yourself are not, surround yourself with that village. It's often the idea of, it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes one autistic child to raise the consciousness of that village. And that for me is very important, where we need to start advocating for these spaces that when somebody else calls out Aaron's behavior, I go, no, he's allowed to do this because he was autistic, not the negative behavior, but I won't allow it to be overshrouded. And I think that's the best advice for parents. It's not just going to the right person, but carrying the journey as when you go into it as well.
And then you did mention that now you're into curriculum. What led you to it?
So it was kind of, I had been a teacher for, by that point, I think 11 to 15 years in education, and I had been involved in a school group where it wasn't speaking my language. And I consequently actually ended up losing my spleen. I became very, very ill, chronically ill at that point. And I actually changed my LinkedIn. And a lady I had met through, who's now my boss, she sort of approached me with this idea, and it's been an ever evolving way of my job. And I think for me, having an autistic child, I didn't want systems to fit him. I wanted him to fit systems. Like I wanted it to be molded. And because my son goes to my school group, well, both of them will be as of next year, I think I sort of wanted to create that world that honored them. And I think that's what I love about my job is I get to create different ways of thinking. And sometimes they're not always right, but I developed a reading program for the group that I work for. And one of the lady that helped me design it is our graphic designer, and her daughter got to see these stories come to life when we were designing them. And the most exciting story was she phoned me the one day and she's like, she loved one of the books that we chose. And she was that excites me that it's not just my child, that curriculum for me is about changing and learning. It's not necessarily about my way is the best way, but learning from others in what works for children and teachers. And the reason I also love my curriculum is because I get to educate young teachers, but I also like their opinions. So I like hearing, Kelly, this didn't work. And that's great because it gives me the experience enough to create something meaningful.
Yeah.
And that's what I want from curriculum. I don't just want the A's to the Z's. How do we get to the A's to the Z's in a fun way or an interpretive way? And watching these children learn is almost like being a teacher, just in a different capacity.
True.
And to know I might have ignited something with a lifelong learning, that excites me.
Yeah.
So curriculum, I think it was always there. I just think it took the maturity of me going through different age groups to understand that's what I need and want.
And then any advice for teachers? Maybe you get a teacher with all the qualifications, because they do come with qualifications.
Of course.
But now they're here. They want to join in. What advice do you say?
I think see the child where they're at. I think see the beauty on their level. And if that is a child lying on the floor, staring into outer space, lie down with them and stare. Ask questions if they're verbal. Allow them to lead. That for me is that we can't just teach the textbook. We ask teachers a lot, did you teach the curriculum today or did you teach the child? Your way of teaching needs to adapt, and sometimes we have to take a step back. We can have a brilliant idea. It doesn't mean it's going to work, but I often love those lessons where the children take the lead. And sometimes we need them to, because I think it teaches us the greater idea of being a teacher is not just to teach, but to be taught. And I think we need to meet those children where they're at and avoid labels. Avoid the label of that is a naughty child. Maybe that child just needs a little bit more understanding, and you need to create that space for me. So definitely meeting teachers where they're at, irrespective of your background. If a child comes to you and can see light and passion glowing within you, you know you've made a connection. And that's the most important part of it.
And what would you say is a very important role that a teacher has to a child? Because lately I've noticed, because I'm looking for schools and all those kind of things. And, I get into a school, I'm like, this is not going to work for my child. So I think maybe, I don't know if they have forgotten the role that they need to play, or is it the financial thing, they're chasing money more than what they're actually supposed to do. So what would you say this is a role that a teacher actually has to a child?
I think the main role that they have is to create the love of learning, to create the love of exploration. That's the role, is to ignite these little candles. There's that one picture of a teacher candle with all these little candles, and they're leaning into it to light. That's the role of the teacher, to create this idea of lifelong learning where they can learn in so many different ways, not just by what the textbook tells them. And unfortunately, yes, the world is becoming so involved in money that it's losing the idea of what education is meant to be. And I think proper teachers know you don't go into education for the money, you go into it for fulfillment. You go into it knowing, I still see children that I taught over 15 years ago who what would now be 17, 18, and running into them randomly to be like, that was my teacher. And I said to you earlier as well, I still know my grade 1 teacher.
Yeah.
I got to see her 2 weeks ago. That's what teaching should be. It shouldn't be a sore spot of a bad memory. But if we can create this lifelong engagement, it will never go away from us as well. School shouldn't be a chore. It should be a place we want to go to explore, not the fact that we've missed a deadline as we progress into primary school and high school. So for me, it's lifelong education. It's about creating that love, and it has to happen by magic. It doesn't just happen with a pretty classroom. It's the way I receive you in your nature and how I nurture it and acknowledge it as well. But I'm always there. I don't falter. Unconditional. That's what teaching is. Yeah. It's not a certificate. It's not a B.Ed. It's far more. Teachers are not created. They are born. And I will know that from anything. And I empathize with you walking into schools where you go, this is not the place for me. Yeah. Because it's the way I feel when I walk into a space. And often we, at DIBA, who I work for as well, we often say to parents, bring your child with. Let them explore. Let's see how they react to the space. That's how you know that you're creating those safe spaces.
True. So tell us more about DIBA.
So DIBA is from the Nordics. We are in over 10 different countries. We are 600 schools strong at the moment. We are not just what I would call a franchise drop. We are very involved in our Nordic partners. I've just come from Latvia this side of the year as well. The Nordics understanding is child-led. It's about how valuable the child is, how they integrate into it as well. And it's just such a beautiful program where their understanding of education, and I love it so much from this perspective, is they see the academic as the cherry on top. They ask their children when they fetch them, not about the day in terms of what they did. Their questions are, were you nice to somebody today? Did you help somebody? And I love that idea because going into school, we're also learning about human contact, and that's what DIBA is. It's about heart. We call it heart culture. It's the I, the you, and the we, and the academics are the cherry on top, because as I'm learning about facts, I'm also learning how to work with the person next to me. And what I love about working for them as an adult is they don't see it as criticism when I do something wrong. They see it as collaboration and how to support. And I think that language change is important. And they view breaks as essential, not overworking, understanding your role and being commended and helped. And that's what we breed into our children as well. Sure. So heart culture is DIBA, and that's where I thrive to be in that way.
It sounds like a dream.
No, it is a dream. It definitely is. No, it's my dream job, definitely.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a dream. Okay, now it's time for us to close. Do you have any last things that you want to?
I think for me, the biggest thing about neurodivergency in general is a lot of people assume that we need to have a separate table to be sat at. My argument is no, just move up in terms of space at your table and give me a chair worth sitting in. And if you can't find that chair, I'll help you and I'll bring my own. And I think that's what I want from my advocacy journey, is to know that we deserve space and we need space, and that doesn't mean we are less.
Wow. Thank you so much for honoring the invite. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I've learned a lot from you, and I really wish that parents out there actually heard what you're saying.
Thank you so much.
That's it for today. Thank you guys for joining in. Thank you for tuning in. Till next time. Cheers. Bye.